Wir haben einen Gast, was tut Mesiras Nefesh mit den Arrestanten nicht nur von sein Stadt, nur von ganz Amerika. Mit größten Stadels hat Masken gewonnen, als reden bei dem Heineken Siyum und mit Betten bei Sholom Lipskar von Aleph Institut, was tut er sehr viel mit den jüdischen Arrestanten, als soll begrüßen dem Heineken Siyum, Rav Lipskar.
Sie haben mir gebeten, ich soll reden auf Englisch, weil sie da sehen, was darf auf Englisch. Ich rede auf Jiddisch und auf Lashon Kodesh. Was sagst du? Jiddisch. Ja, Jiddisch. Ha? Auf Jiddisch darf ich mir nicht haben, sie da sehr viel da was reden und können reden besser von mir. In any case, I don't know about you guys, but for us little people from small cities, not from New York, it's very intimidating. It's very difficult to speak in the Rebbe's Beis Medrash. It's not so easy. And this opportunity is also the same, since the Siyum that you made this evening is something that the Rebbe asked for. So everything here is according to the Rebbe's will. So anybody that speaks or anybody that participates in this is doing the will of the Rebbe. So from that perspective, it's a serious matter. The primary reason that the Rebbe said to make Siyumim, which was very clear, was in order to be able to eliminate the darkness, the pain, the negativity, all that exists that is represented by Ov, the Siyum of Ov, as Rabbi Kotlarski told me, that with the addition of these types of events, he will add in the aid, in the light, in the positive forces that exist, and simultaneously he will be able to eliminate all of the negative forces that exist. So if we have a real Siyum, it means that we're involved in something very, very significant. That in one place in the world, there is somebody that cares about eliminating the darkness. Most of the world is concerned with commemorating the destruction. And when they do make a Siyum, it's in order to be able to eat meat. I know they invite us to make Siyumim in the various hotels in Miami and in other places because the guests pay money and you have to eat steak. So the only way to do it is by making a Siyum. But this Siyum, I noticed there's no steak on the table, it's only fish. So the reason is very obvious why the Siyum is made. It's in order to be able to bring out holiness. And I have to tell you, a few months ago, I was here in New York, and I was with a group of people. We were involved in a very significant negotiation in building an important thing, developing an institution that was important to the Rebbe. And the one thing that they didn't really understand was, what's so different about this Jewish leader? We just happened not to be here on Sunday. They never got $1 from the Rebbe. They didn't have that personal interaction. And they didn't know what was different about the Rebbe. What's significant about him? And of course, his scholarship and his greatness, and the fact that he's a Rebbe, and the fact that he was able to organize and to lead the most powerful Jewish organization in the world. All the secular approaches to such leadership, that was their approach. But still, they wanted to understand what's deeper about him. It happened that we finished the meeting that we had very late in the evening. It was very late in Midtown Manhattan. And they decided that instead of I should take a taxi, they would drive me back home where I was staying over here in Crown Heights. So it was about 3:30 in the morning, 3:30 in that range, about 4 o'clock, and we started riding from 51st Street and 5th Avenue, 57th Street and 5th Avenue, all the way here. And the only people we saw on the streets was what we call the very lowest elements of humanity. Of course, together with garbage trucks and bakery trucks and a few policemen here and there. But basically, it was a very decrepit world that we faced. In Manhattan, there were still cars riding along at that time in the morning. But when we came into Brooklyn, it was almost dead. You saw a homeless person hanging around, somebody sleeping on a bench, somebody standing on a corner, but very few other people. And as we rode down Eastern Parkway, I decided that I was going to show them the headquarters. So we rode down the street here, and every place was absolutely silent. Just the street lights. It was like a drizzly night, so it looked especially ominous. And as we rode by 770, the Rebbe's light was on in his room. Just so happened. So they said, I said, that's the Rebbe's office. Light is on. So I said, it's true. I said, he's the world's babysitter. I said, when everybody's sleeping and when the negative evil forces are out there preying on us, there's one man in the world that he stays up and he makes sure that no harm comes to each and every one of us. That ride by here closed the deal. They understood what was different about the Rebbe. In that one singular moment. We're talking about eliminating the darkness. And it's very important to recognize, from where I come in my community, we're talking a lot about Moshiach. Moshiach is coming. Moshiach is here. Moshiach bo, Moshiach has to be revealed. All about Moshiach. It's the most significant topic in any part of the world today, especially anywhere where there's a Lubavitcher. Moshiach. Anytime I see friends of mine, today I had friends come to visit me here, they say, hey, Rabbi, so what's the latest on Moshiach? That's the competition. What's the latest on Moshiach? When I come back to Miami, already my wife told me that there's a gathering, we're going to gather tomorrow night. They'll want to know what's with Moshiach? You went to the headquarters, what's going on? I mean, what's the latest? I mean, where is it at? What's the next step towards that imminent process? And the truth of the matter is, every time I call here, I say, so what's the latest about Mashiach? And I came here, I sort of wanted to feel a little bit about Mashiach. So the fact of coming here and being by the Rebbe, davening mincha, ma'ariv with the Rebbe, and getting $1 from the Rebbe, and being in the Rebbe's Meismedish, that's very special. But the fact that Mashiach doesn't feel like he's any more imminent than the last time I was here, maybe that's part of my weakness too. But if he was here, you would have to break through even my thick shell. Because if you can't break through my thick shell, there's a lot of guys out there that are much more thick than me. And it means that you can't break through their thick shell either. And it's serious. When the Rebbe talks about Mashiach, and we're just talking about what does the Rebbe mean Mashiach is imminent. So this Shabbos, every Shabbos he adds something, even though the Rebbe does repeat things, because you have to repeat things to students who don't understand the first time, so he has to keep on repeating things. But every time he says something new. So this Shabbos he said too, what I considered, I read it very briefly in the Teichen Kotzer, so I wasn't there like you were there. But he said some very significant things. And last Shabbos I read the Hanacha, so I'm a little bit more acquainted with it. He talked about, obviously, his agenda is Mashiach. That's the Rebbe's agenda. So what he talks about is how to bring Mashiach. So he said last week, he said how to bring Mashiach is very simple. 2 elements, he said. The first thing is, Machda Eretz Yisrael. He says, make this place Israel. And the second thing he said was, get used to a Mashiach's living experience. So I was talking to a nice young man here, and he was telling me, well, we have to get used to the fact that we have to fantasize, what is it going to be like when Mashiach comes? What's going to happen when Mashiach comes? But you don't have to fantasize. You open up the Rambam in the 11th chapter of Hilchos Malachim, and you see what happens when Mashiach comes. You don't have to fantasize. There's no fantasy about when Mashiach comes. When the Rebbe says you have to get used to Mashiach, he doesn't mean you have to get used to the fantasy of Mashiach. He means you have to get used to the reality of Mashiach. It means you have to start living like Mashiach wants you to live. What does it mean to start living like Mashiach wants you to live? It says in the end of Hilchos Melachim, the Mashiach comes, Madanim ki ofar, which means all pleasures will be like dust. And man's whole perception and his whole direction and his yearning will be to understand godliness. So from a practical point of view, I'm not here to admonish you because I speak the same way to myself. And I speak the same way to my community of people who have no connection with holiness and Jewishness like you have. They never learned Hasidus from the text because they don't know how to read Hebrew. And I say to them, if you want Mashiach, then next time, instead of standing and talking about what's happening on the corner or what's the latest news in the mountains, sit down and learn a Maimer Chassidus. That's what's going to happen when Mashiach comes. It's very basic. And if you don't enjoy it, you're not going to enjoy Mashiach because that's what's going to be there that time. What do you think is going to happen there? You're going to get herring that's going to taste better than what tastes here. You're going to be better refreshments at your Siyum. That's not the story. It says you're going to learn and understand holiness and godliness. That will be your yearning. So get used to it. You know what get used to it means? If you don't like it, it doesn't matter. Get used to it anyways. I want to tell you a very tragic story. One tragic story. I'm not going to spend too much time up here. It just happened this week, Tuesday night. I have a study class where I teach the Rebbe Sichos in English. Not from the book, but just prepare a number of Sichos on the Parsha and share it with people. We have a very large group of Jews that come to listen. So one of my employees, Baal Tshuva, who is knowledgeable in communication. He used to anchor a news, an ABC news station. So he came to me, he says, Rabbi, he says, this story is the wildest story. We have very wild stories happening in our class. People coming back to Tshuva, people's backgrounds, very interesting events that happen because we have a big group, a few hundred people come regularly. So you have interesting things that take place. And then we have a prison program as well. So, you know, there's a lot of nice stories that we could sit here a whole night and really have a good time talking about good stories. But he says, this story is like the top of the stories. I've never heard anything. Rabbi, you got to talk to this lady. He says, you see that lady sitting over there? I looked. He says, please make sure you talk to her. I said, what is it? He says, I don't know. And the guy was white. He says, I don't know what this is. He says, she might be nuts. She doesn't look nuts. She doesn't talk nuts. Her friend that brought her says she's a nice lady. The friend that brought her has been coming to our class now for a long time. A very nice person that started to light candle Shabbos night. She started to have a kosher home. She started to keep a little bit of Shabbos slowly, but a normal person with a good job. She's a professional. She's an attorney. And she does everything the right way. She brought this person. And she said, I can't figure anything about you. You must talk to her. I said, of course I'll talk to her. And then he comes over. He says, Rabbi, come to the side. And he whispers in my ear. He said, she says that she grew up in a religious environment, a Hasidic environment, and she baptized. She became a Christian. So I looked at this lady, and I saw her from the distance, and she was very neatly dressed. She looked normal. And I said, well, call her over. I'll be very happy to talk to her. A few minutes later, she came over, and she was a little shaky. And she says, I said, well, welcome. It's nice to see you. This is the first time here. You know, I hope you'll come again. She says, actually, she says, I was a little scared. She says, when I saw you, I really got scared. I didn't know that it was a Lubavitcher that taught this class here. They didn't tell me that. She says, because I come from Crown Heights. She lived in Crown Heights for 6 years. She has 2 children, ages 5 and 6 years old. She baptized and belongs to a Baptist church. And what she told me is not something I will share with you because that's not important this evening, but it made my hair stand on end. Her husband is in the streets, but she lived here. And then she moved away. She's been away from here now for 4 years. And she has a number of friends who are also in that category. I said, so why did you come to Crown Heights? So she said that I wanted to seek my Jewish roots. She was a Baal Tshuva. And she knew everybody. She knew everybody. And she knew everything. She knew about Hasidus, and she learned Tanya, and she learned Chitas, because I tested her. I wanted to know if she's for real. Maybe I thought she was a faker. And she said, if my boyfriend knew I was here, he would kill me. He would really kill me. And I thought to myself that, not to say, this is not a negative comment about this community, but when we talk about we want Moshiach, the next time you really feel like you want Moshiach, instead of talking to somebody about what's going on in the other person's house or something negative, keep your mouth shut and talk to somebody about becoming better, or talk to yourself about becoming better. If you don't do it, if this group here doesn't do it, the fact that the Rebbe said that I've done everything I could, now it's up to you, everybody got so alarmed. What did the Rebbe mean? He did everything. It was very simple what he said. He said, I gave you everything and you're blowing it. That's exactly what he said. I gave you everything you want. I gave you wisdom. I gave you knowledge. I gave you interpretations. I gave you fame. I gave you recognition. I gave you acceptance. I gave you everything you wanted. Why don't you do something about it? And the fact is that when we walk away from here tonight, what's going to be our commitment for tomorrow morning? Will everybody make a commitment for tomorrow morning at least not to open up their mouths and speak bad about anybody? Is it possible for nobody in this room to speak bad about anybody? If it's not possible for that to happen in this room, then when you're talking about putting ads in the New York Times, forget about that stuff. I don't mean forget about it. I'm not trying to minimize it. But it's supposed to start here. When I take the guy that got touched by the New York Times, he says, I love it, man. This is it. I want Moshiach. I can't wait for it. Take me to the source. And I'd bring him in here at 7:30 this evening. I'd have to search for some corner where he'd feel Moshiach. I have to find some place where I can stick him and say, hey, Mashiach, let's try to find some place where it feels like Mashiach. Because just walking in here, he wouldn't feel it. When those Jews who are ready to be brought back to holiness and are ready to reckon Mashiach, when they come here in streams, what are they going to meet here? Who are they going to meet? Are they going to meet the dynamic group of young Chassidim who sit and learn and are talking about God's wisdom? Or are they going to have a guy that's going to sit and say, hey, who's in that stretch limousine? Hey, who came? Look at that new stretch. I wonder who came there. Hey, what did the Rebbe say to this guy? I'll tell you what the Rebbe said to a Jew that I brought to the Rebbe today. The Rebbe said to the Rebbe, thank you for the blessings and for the guidance that you've given me. So the Rebbe said to him, he smiled to him, and he said, make sure you cash in to its fullest extent. Cash in on the blessings. You're right here. You're right at the center of where everything's taking place. If you're not going to cash in on it, then it's a wasted experience. And it's not an example. And serious, it's a very serious matter. I'm sitting here, the reason I was sitting here tonight is not that I'm such a Hasidic person that I like to hang around. I really don't like to hang around. But I was sitting here tonight because I've got to come back with some warmth. What am I going to say? I was by the Rebbe. Yeah, but what happened over there? The guy's like hepped up. Is like Mashiach on top of the table. Is everybody talking about Mashiach's coming? Everybody learning about the holiness of... So, I got nothing more to say. The bracha is that Mashiach, our king and our teacher, should look at us and say, it's time to reveal himself.
Amen. A größen, a herzen, ja, shekoyach, Rav Lipskar, und der Eber soll helfen, sheyifelu, ba shoymim, als es hat gesagt, man soll takke film Moshiach in 770, in jeder Winkele.